Reginald pushed Rose along the palace corridor. She clutched Isidore tightly, her arms aching from the effort, but she dared not put him down.
Almost there, Miss Rose. I am sure the Queen will be most pleased you return the boy to her.
There was a sudden swoosh and thud as a wooden crutch struck Reginald from behind. Liliana raised her crutch again and again, pounding Reginald's skull until he was almost certainly dead. She spit on his body, then replaced the now bloodied crutch under her shoulder. She looked at Isidore in Rose's arms and limped toward him.
Isidore! You're alive!
Auntie!
Liliana pulled both Isidore and Rose into a big hug. She let go and looked Rose in the eyes.
Thank you for saving him. Thank you for saving us.
They tensed at the sound of approaching footsteps, moving quickly. The three of them were standing near an intersection of corridors. This person was approaching from one of the other hallways. Liliana hefted her crutch again, ready to use it.
As I neared Aldrich's office, my pace increased. I was racing down the halls with such a singular focus that I almost tripped over myself when I reached an intersection of corridors and saw two figures standing on my right. But it wasn't two, it was three. Liliana, Rose, and little Isidore clinging tightly to his mother. But I didn't get the chance to finish my thought. Look out! She pointed behind me. Instinctively, I ducked and whirled around, thrusting my sword. The blade sunk into the chest of a bandit. He froze solid and then shattered as I removed my blade. I faced Rose again, preparing to thank her, but she grabbed me and wrapped me in her arms. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry. So sorry for all that I've done. I rubbed my hand on her shoulder reassuringly. I couldn't help but notice her hair had come back, but I did not care to ask her how. I know you can never forgive me, but I do forgive you, Rose. She pulled away from me, her teary eyes filled with shock. You do? I know now that not everything that occurred was your fault. You and I were both pawns in another's game. Her game. We stared at each other, two former queens of Elisaria. Though we could not be more different, we did not need to be enemies. We heard others approaching and turned. It was Henry and Aldrich. The surprise on their faces at seeing me and Rose together was obvious. I could see that they had so many questions. There is no time, we must go now. All of us rushed to Aldrich's office. I shouted to Skylar as we entered. Skylar, it is us. She had her hands raised, a fireball in each. She doused the flames on seeing us. I looked over at the wall covered in the icy barrier that Skylar and I had erected. Inside was the safe containing the fairy tear. I see the ice barrier has held up.
What happened to my fireplace?
The mantle had to be destroyed. The Dark Queen was using it as a doorway. Bronwyn's attempt to destroy the runes was not enough, so... She gestured to the damage. At least she cannot get in so easily. Do any of you hear that? We all quieted and listened. Henry looked round.
I do not hear anything.
I do. I heard a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound. It's coming from outside the room. We opened the door and peered into the corridor. The sound was louder out here. It seemed to be coming from behind a door directly opposite Aldrich's office.
It is a storage closet.
We approached the door. Aldrich threw it open. The stench of burnt flesh hit us immediately. Sir James. all that was left of him, stood in the small storage closet, using the exposed bone of his finger to scratch runes into the wall. Skylar went pale. God, no. With one last stroke of his finger, the runes were completed, glowing blue, and suddenly the entire storage closet filled with blinding light. We backed up into Aldrich's office. In front of us, the tall, lithe form of the Dark Queen emerged from the newly made portal.
The front door was locked. I hope you don't mind that I used a side entrance.
She grinned.
And now I'll have the stone, please. Your time is up. Hand it over.
You cannot have it.
It is mine by right. It was meant to be my gift.
It was you? You were my father's concubine, to whom the fairy tear was intended.
Yes, a concubine turned queen, like you.
She shot a glance at Rose.
I would have thought you'd be more sympathetic.
We hurled spells, pelting her with everything we could. I attempted to freeze her legs. Skylar struck at her face with flames, and Aldrich and Henry slashed at her with their swords. Somehow she deflected everything. Though she was already powerful, she seemed to grow more as she neared where the stone was hidden. I generated a large chunk of ice the size of a small boulder, and used my magical force to send it flying toward her. The heavy block knocked her backward.
Well done, Bronwyn.
I glanced at him as a smile flashed across his face. For the briefest moment, he looked at me as he did in our youth, a crown prince filled with excitement and determination. He, Henry, and Skylar seized the opportunity to attack while the Queen was stunned. She was entirely on the defensive, and I thought I saw fear in her eyes. She had not expected all of us at once. She used her magic to form a shadowy sword, which she used to fend off the onslaught. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Liliana and Rose crouching behind Aldrich's desk with Isidore. The Dark Queen saw them too.
Enough of this. Isidore, take them out.
No! Isidore's face took on an eerie calm as his eyes went dark. He raised his arms, and the room was thrown into absolute chaos. Furniture lifted off of the ground, as did we. We were thrown about the room. His power and the Dark Queen's threatened to bring down the room around us. I could hear the walls cracking. Rubble began to fall. I looked and saw that Skylar, Liliana, and Henry were stunned. A portion of the wall threatened to come down on them. I ran to their aid and held up the wall by freezing portions of it. The weight was immense, and it took all my concentration to keep it from falling.
Good. Now, help me break the barrier. Help me get the fairy tear.
Isidore turned, ready to aid his queen. But Rose, battered and bloody from being thrown across the room, crawled toward him. Isidore! Remember what Mummy told you! He stared at her, his expression blank. You are good! You are good! Isidore twitched. The darkness in his eyes receded.
I am good. I am good.
He was back to himself. He waddled over to Rose, who held him tight.
Fine. If you will not help me, then you are an obstacle to me.
She pointed a finger at the child, her hand humming with raw power.
You were always supposed to die.
Dark energy exploded from her fingertip toward the child, but it did not reach him. Aldrich leapt into the way and held up his sword. The runes on the ancient sword glowed brightly as the weapon absorbed the dark energy.
How dare you?
This is my kingdom, and you are not welcome!
Aldrich swung his sword, releasing all the power it had absorbed in one potent wave.
No!
The magical blast struck the queen fully and tumbled back into the wall, crumpling to the floor.
This is not the end.
She gasped and twitched, then went quiet.